You're listening to Cool and Unusual Punishment Presents Chosen. This is episode 12. My name is Tyler, and joining me as always, my co-host Jody. How are you?
I'm great. This episode is about money, and it's about the mismanagement of money that came to light in the, if you recall the report from episode 1 that I've referenced back to a couple of times, that team recommended an audit be done because there had been concerns raised during the interviews about mismanagement of funds and potentially embezzlement and this and that. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, they suggested that an audit be done by an independent third-party company and that it be done sooner rather than later, right? So that was actually done. There was a Leader Telegram story on December 6th of 2015 that talks a bit about this at a high level, how Valley Brook's transitional leadership team hired the accounting firm Wipfli to conduct an audit of the church's books and then reported those findings to the congregation. So those findings got reported in a meeting. Valley Brook's transitional leadership team was present. That included people that were present while everything was going on.
Yeah.
It also included the lawyer. Mm-hmm. And that lawyer forbid people from recording that explicitly. People were not given handouts. People were not allowed to see the audit itself. The slides and whatnot were hand-selected by the people from Valley Brook and the lawyer as to what they wanted the congregation to know about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, as a result of this, there were some people that were not okay with what they were hearing and the fact that it just seemed to be like, well, look at this, everybody. This happened, and let's just point our compass towards better times.
This audit, I'm assuming, doesn't have, like, it's not a police investigation, so it's not like there's not necessarily consequences.
Right.
It's just an accounting of, like, here's where your money may have been going or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, let's look at your books. Where don't we have receipts? Where don't we have this, that? And
it's presented by the leadership team, the transitional leadership team, admittedly, but not by a third party. It's by Valley Brook that's summarizing this report to its congregation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a group of people that was bothered by this, and they decide that they are going to send a letter, quite a bit of which I'm going to read to you, to the Eau Claire Police Department.
Okay.
And they are going to lay out with as many details as they can, not having gotten to look at actual receipts, what they think the problems are and that they want something to be done about it. We are former members of Valley Brook Church, spanning several years. We are not attorneys or accountants, but we are concerned that, number one, Doug Lebsack, former lead pastor, and Mary Clark, former executive pastor, used and or authorized use of church money for personal purposes. Number 2, Valley Brook staff received benefits that were not reported to the IRS, and so they did not pay income taxes on those additional benefits. Number 3, funds were raised under one pretext, but the donations were actually spent on unrelated expenditures, including personal expenses. Background. Several pastors and overseers resigned from Valley Brook Church in the spring, February, March of 2015. Good time for me to remind everybody that's the time period we are talking about in this podcast. Valley Brook Church, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Very specific period of time following spiritual abuse allegations and, some of the time leading up to that. No commentary on Valley Brook Church in its present.
Right.
And leaders were implicated in creating an abusive environment at the church. The denomination to which Valley Brook belonged, Converge Great Lakes Baptist, met with past and current congregants and staff members. Converge Great Lakes released a report of their findings, the Crisis Intervention Team Executive Summary of Recommendations and Findings, which is included. The people interviewed voiced suspicions of mishandling of finances, but nothing was verified at the time. These points are highlighted on page 6, along with Converge's recommendations to conduct an audit on page 7, which I mentioned at the top. After Clifton Larson Allen, which is a finance company, began a general financial review, it was quickly revealed that a forensic audit was necessary. Valley Brook contacted Wipfli to do a forensic audit of their finances for the time frame of January 2014 through March 2015. And a forensic audit is kind of like what, if anybody listened to Luganbild, it's like line by line. So this, the original people that started this were like, we're sorry, we can't help you with this. I can't imagine. Current leadership at Valley Brook, the transitional leadership team, shared some of the results of that audit at a meeting open to the general public on October 25th, 2015. From the mishandlings of the finances, which could include criminal conduct and misconduct related to the IRS and their tax-exempt status, Valley Brook was careful not to make any assessments of the information, nor say whether anything illegal happened, per the counsel of their attorney. Some examples are included in bullet points at the end of this document. We were asked not to record the meeting, and Valley Brook's attorney advised them not to create any sort of handouts. So the information provided at the end is based on notes taken during the meeting and are as accurate as possible given those circumstances. Despite the results of the forensic audit, Valley Brook confirmed in a letter sent out on February 3rd, 2016, that they will not be pursuing any legal action. This letter seemed to verify that Valley Brook had grounds to pursue legal action, but they were choosing not to do so. Because actually, you see, Valley Brook is the, quote, victim in this, if that makes sense.
Right.
The two people we believe to be mainly responsible for possible financial criminal behavior were former lead pastor Doug Lebsack and former executive pastor Mary Clark, as they were exclusively responsible for the financial management of Valley Brook Church. We haven't talked much about Mary Clark, but you'll get some context here as to why she's included in this.
Okay.
Next, actually. Is this all making sense so far? Cool. Mary Clark, former executive pastor at Valley Brook Church until her resignation around March 25th, 2015. Mary was in charge of financial tasks and record keeping at Valley Brook. There was no bookkeeper, no treasurer, no accountant, and no finance committee. She had exclusive access to checks, etc., as evidenced in an included email, which I don't have, but I have been told about that email, and it was like an exchange talking about, hey, I've got a donation, how do I get it to you? And it became clear in the back and forth that she was the only one that you would be able to connect with to do such a thing. She was reported to be previously employed in a bookkeeping position in a retail setting. This previous experience that should have lent her some skills and competence in the area of finances. Mary Clark lived in a parish house while on staff at Valley Brook, and it is unclear whether that situation was ethical. She is currently the head pastor with somewhere else in Eau Claire. Doug Lebsack, former lead pastor of Valley Brook Church until his resignation in February 2015 after being in that position for 10 years. He legally adopted his co-lead pastor, Nate Hagedorn, an adult married man and father of 4 children. It is our thought that Nate is mainly a victim in a personally abusive relationship and was not a perpetrator of financial misconduct. However, he may have been a beneficiary of the misconduct. Our complaint is not aimed at him. Valley Brook had a paid bookkeeper on staff when Doug began his tenure approximately 11 years ago. She had worked in that position for 11 years and had CPA credentials. He fired her shortly after his arrival and did not hire another bookkeeper or accountant. His position carried sole discretion for hiring people and setting salaries. We are unsure who set budgets. Our understanding is that written policies and job descriptions did not exist at the time of Doug's resignation. Oh, these nonprofits.
I was going to say, it was starting to sound familiar. It was like, well, there was no bookkeeper, there was no finance person. It seemed like a real hollow shell of an organization with one guy who had a lot of money.
Yeah. Valley Brook was under the tax-exempt umbrella of Converge until fall of 2014, when they sought to leave that covering and received their own tax-exempt status. Due to the timing of votes to release Valley Brook from their organization, at the time of Doug's resignation, Valley Brook was still a part of Converge, even though they were a separate tax entity, which I believe we talked about. That vote not happening is probably what made that investigation possible into the spiritual abuse in the first place. If they hadn't been...
Yeah, I remember there being talk of, from Doug or from leadership, about wanting to separate from Converge
and kind of vilifying them.
Yeah.
To provide a scope of the amount of money that Doug Lebsack and Mary Clark handled at Valley Brook, this is a table of their proposed budgets for an upcoming fiscal year, the budget they reported at the end of that year, and the total income received by the church, which we did cover, if you recall. We had an episode some time back where we talked about the budgets.
Yeah.
This information was taken from the summaries provided to the congregation at annual meetings. While Mary Clark kept financial records in QuickBooks, the annual report was not printed out from that program, but rather summarized with little detail. This is the information that was given to the congregation at annual meetings, and there is no verification of its accuracy. I mean, we've gone over them before, but they're quick. Yeah. Fiscal year 2008 to 2009. Proposed budget, $710,000. There was no reported budget, no total income. 2009 to 2010, same amount for proposed budget. There's no reported budget. There's no total income. 2010 to 2011, $660,000 proposed budget. Reported budget, $873,165. Total income, $989,166. 2011 to 12, $740,000 proposed budget. Reported, $841,003. Total income, $905,774. 2012 to 13, $765,000 proposed budget. Reported, $803,077. Total income, $803,791. 2013 to 14, proposed $755,000. Reported $777,419. Total income $749,613. 2014 to 2015, $748,000 proposed. Reported $390,000. Total income $390,000. So there is an asterisk next to 2014 and 15. Doug Lebsack and Mary Clark resigned before the completion of this fiscal year. The budget information for this year was provided in detail by the current leadership at Valley Brook, which, if you remember, when we were going through those budgets, suddenly the last one was like very specific.
Had a real budget suddenly?
Yeah, suddenly you could see actual costs for phones and stuff like that. At least one staff member reported to us that they never had access to the amount of money claimed in the budget or the report for their ministry. Unreconciled bank statement balances for January 31st through April 30th, 2015. January, $86,633. February, $73,032. March, $35,875. April, $38,244. Revelations from the oral report read by Valley Brook on October 25th, 2015. Financial record-keeping documents were deleted, including QuickBooks and Google Docs. The QuickBooks interactions were specifically tied to Mary Clark's login and happened in the days immediately prior to her resignation. Mary claims she did delete QuickBooks data out of anger. Doug said financial records were accidentally deleted when his Gmail account was shut down, since they were stored in the Google Drive affiliated with his email. The Wipfli accountants explained that Google provides several warnings and a person must take several steps before deleting an entire user account. There were also several options offered for downloading information. Destroying all records would not happen incidentally while trying to delete an email account.
The excuses are like a kid with a book report and like professionals being like, by the way, this is...
Yes.
This is not a real excuse. It's not a serious person.
Yeah. Tens of thousands of dollars were unsubstantiated without any records or receipts. There was very little documentation of spending related to actual church work or ministry. Okay, get this. In 2014, there was 483 transactions, and only 159 of those had related receipts.
Okay.
Approximately $102,000 was spent across 12 church credit cards in that 15-month period, most of it without receipts or records tying it to ministry expenses.
I mean, I think maybe you mentioned already that Raise the Roof program or whatever when they needed money, and it was like they brought in like $90,000 in a month or something. That's a lot of money to have on 12 credit cards with no receipts.
Yeah.
Okay.
The total from the offering did not always match the deposit, sometimes more, sometimes less, sometimes reconciled the following week, sometimes not. Mary Clark was reimbursed for expenditures at IKEA, $457.74 for household items, PM Sleep Center, a pillow top mattress delivered to her residence, and Ashley, which is a furniture company for those not local, $538.02 for a sleeper sofa. These items are not on church premises. Approximately $6,051 was spent by multiple staff on dining without records of ministry purposes. Over $1,000 was spent at clothing stores. Approximately $3,500 was paid to Beyond Organic for supplements, believed to be kept in a refrigerator that was designated for Doug and Nate. After Doug's resignation in February, a church member and overseer requested that his recent donation of $5,000 be redirected to Doug Lebsack. So staff member, the secretary, sent Doug Lebsack a check for $5,000.
I guess we're not going to get any more details on that, but
I'm sure this guy must have been pissed. I'm assuming that he gave $5,000 to the church. This all happened February. Stuff's unraveling. Doug is resigning, and he decides that Doug's going to get his money. And he must have then complained to the church and said, "I donated $5,000."
Fled the state and he said, "I want that check to follow him to Texas."
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't even think you can do that.
Apparently you can.
There was a, quote, lead pastor discretionary fund that was not presented to the congregation at any time during the annual meeting. Items in the fund were labeled for things such as a sleigh ride, chiropractor. Interesting. We know that he had one of those.
Supplements don't work if you're not also getting the spine work.
And a $1,000 graduation bonus for Mary Clark.
We'd mentioned the fridge before.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was like a Doug and Nate fridge. Like this is for our personal
Nobody else can go
our
in there.
personal suppies.
Don't even look at that refrigerator.
2 labels on the front, Doug, Nate.
We are so in love with everything in this refrigerator. Doug Lepsack was allowed $10,000 as a benefit to be reimbursed for medical care for his family. He was reimbursed $34,832. Verizon bills for staff and their families, including children, totaled $29,952 for the time period and included phone service for Doug's adult married daughter. Boy, this sure makes that Joe Luganbill stuff. That's chump change. $29,000 alone for Verizon here.
Yeah. Well, as we've already learned, a financial audit is when someone combs through your finances and then holds nobody responsible for it.
That's right.
Right.
Should have said that at the start.
Right.
Valleybrook leased property to an area church. The church wrote their checks out to Mary Clark rather than Valleybrook. It is unclear whether all of that money was deposited back to Valleybrook. I'm sure it was. Doug's credit card and Mary's credit card had combined charges of more than $350 to their Valleybrook credit cards for services like Hulu and iTunes. There was no explained ties to ministry purposes. From 2008 to 2014, Valleybrook reimbursed $6,488 in parking tickets, over half of which occurred on the UWEC campus. Mary Clark attended classes there. There are no Valleybrook buildings on campus.
Double parking all around campus. This is what God wants me to do.
Travel expenses for the Clark family were charged to Valleybrook and may or may not have been reimbursed. Mary Clark wrote a check with the word tithe in the memo, but then the check was recorded in Valleybrook QuickBooks as being for, quote, Clark Hotel. Missions donations. The church congregation was presented with a budget of $75,000 that would be donated to other ministries, local charities, and missionaries. What was actually donated ended up being about 45% of that, $33,895.
That's tough because that was one of the few things in all of this that it's like, well, it does seem like they do a lot of outreach. At least Doug talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, they did 45% of it, I guess.
Yeah. There's an asterisk under that. A former Converge pastor and Valleybrook member until 2015, I'm going to redact that name, was given $1,700 of support in 2013 and $1,200 of support in 2014. Reason unclear. Cash was found in Mary Clark's office after her resignation. There was a bag labeled Kids Offering, possibly related to a drive to send shoes to children in Africa, and others labeled as donations collected for a specific group, but there was no record of the donation actually being made. Valleybrook paid out $7,738 in late fees, penalties, and interest. These were not included in any budget items presented to the church. Valleybrook received notices from the IRS and the Wisconsin Department of Revenue of intent to seize property due to their delinquency. Valleybrook had sufficient funds to pay all of their bills when they were due, but they didn't. Valleybrook congregants received letters from the overseers for the same time period stating that giving was $18,000 below budget needs.
Oh, well.
Well.
You misplaced that bag of cash, I guess.
Valleybrook had several Sam's Club membership cards and no one used the tax-exempt number when making purchases.
I mean, it's like slumming if you use the tax-exempt number. You want to pay the fee because it's a status thing.
Doug's combined salary and housing allowance in 2014 to 2015, after he graciously agreed not to accept a raise, was $113,033. Mary Clark's salary and housing allowance was $65,666, up from $63,514. This salary does not include the lead pastor discretionary fund, phones, or other purchases that may have been made. We have included 2 letters from the Valley Brook overseers as an example of what was being communicated to us as congregants who made donations, and we've seen several of those letters in a previous episode. The overseers let us know that giving was falling short of needs, and they promised our money was being used responsibly. We have no concerns about current financial mismanagement. We are disappointed in their unwillingness to report a possible crime and to not report possible tax violations to the IRS. And this is just a little bit of, they were like laying out all the key players in this. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So we got Doug, we've got Mary, we've got the church itself, current interim pastor, Tim Haugen, transitional leadership team member who has done the most work on finances, Chris Solberg, Valley Brook's attorney, Brian Symes from Reuter Ware. We request anonymity due to previous incidents of defamation and trying to silence opposition to the leaders in question. Some of us have children, and they also face retribution if we are identified because there are people with ties to these churches involved in their school. So they provide the summary, which we've seen. They provide the correspondence from Mary Clark, which clearly identifies her, budgets and reports, the Valley Brook current budget. So this is the letter they send to the Eau Claire Police Department with all of those attachments, right?
It makes me think, you were saying that there was this attitude during the transition and after of only wanting to look forward and to keep moving and to not reflect. I guess I had assumed that meant spiritually, ethically. Looking back is what they didn't want to do, but also it seems financially.
Well, if you are an overseer or if you were in some sort of position of power and it comes to light during an extensive police investigation that there was problems, you might become implicated in the same way.
Sure.
That if you have a board of directors that is your family, you also are maybe not so terribly interested in having something really done. It doesn't so much shock me that, Date, 5/16/2016, time 13:07:23, Eau Claire Police Department incident report. All right, here we go. Person reporting info, we're going to redact. Suspect, Doug Lebsack. Suspect, Mary Clark. Victim is Valley Brook Church. On February 12th, 2016, Sergeant Mark Piper handed me a small binder containing documents he received from an unknown source. He advised that he spoke with, redacted, let's just say that he spoke to somebody who was tied to sending this letter in. Okay. Sergeant Piper advised me that while speaking with this person, they advised that they would have someone drop off documents to support the claims of embezzlement from the church by Lebsack and Clark. Sergeant Piper found the binder on his desk with no indication of how it was received. Cool.
Yeah.
I reviewed the contents of the binder, which included contact information for this person, parent co-reporters for this information, and as you remember, it was anonymous in that letter for obvious reasons. The summary section is a 6-page overview of alleged abuse and financial mismanagement by Lebsack and Clark during the time Lebsack was pastor of Valley Brook Church, approximately 2005 to 2015. The author of the documents is unidentified, but a Google search for the church name located a blog, Tales from the Cult, with nearly identical information. So Matthew Mitchell had the blog. And to be honest with you, he was a keeper of a lot of the documents. So you could not just say, oh, I'm sure Matthew is the one that did this because his stuff is on his blog. He was cataloging stuff for people, if that makes sense, The summary states that Lebsack, Clark, and several overseers of the church resigned in February or March as church membership questioned financial and other practices. Clark was responsible for financial accounting and claimed she accidentally deleted her QuickBooks program containing all financial records about the time of her departure. Converge Great Lakes, the umbrella organization for Valley Brook Church, conducted an internal investigation and provided a summary of recommendations, which we are familiar with. A statement from the transitional leadership team was included in the binder. That statement confirms that the audit did reveal evidence of financial mismanagement that was costly to Valley Brook Church. However, the statement also explains that the transitional leadership team has decided not to pursue legal action. Quote, "We have reached the conclusion that we believe God is directing us to put this behind us, to close this chapter and to release the debt." End quote. Also included in the binder are emails from Clark directing persons to deliver checks to her, Wisconsin Department of Financial Institution, WDFI, records showing a new church, Ethos Church, Inc., which the summary states is Clark's new church on the UWEC campus, a document referring to a new nonprofit in Texas that's tied to Doug, and other church correspondence. The binder did not contain specific evidence or documentation of financial mismanagement because, of course, it couldn't, because nobody was given the financial audit. The attorney for Valley Brook Church was identified in the summary as Brian Symes at Reuter Ware in Eau Claire. I called Brian on 2/16/2016 to determine the willingness of the church to pursue a criminal investigation. He was out of the office, so I left a voicemail. As of this report, I have not received a return call, and that's 2/17/2016. All right, let's fast forward to 4/18/2016. Contacts Brian Symes, Reuter Ware, and then there's members of the Valley Brook Church leadership team. Details. I contacted attorney Brian Symes, an associate of Reuter Ware Law Firm and representative for Valley Brook Church, about setting up a meeting with the Valley Brook Church leadership team. We exchanged several phone calls and ultimately set up a meeting for April 20th, 2016 at the Reuter Ware office. Members of the leadership team were present. In the days leading up to the meeting, we exchanged email, and I explained the expectations I had with respect to the documents and information I would need to proceed with my investigation. And I should point out that leadership team members were expected to be there.
Right.
On 4/18/2016, I received a phone call from attorney Symes, who explained that the leadership team for Valley Brook Church did not wish to pursue a criminal complaint in this manner. He explained some confusion on their part as to the reason for the meeting. But once they reviewed the expectations I set forth for a criminal investigation, they decided that the church has no desire to pursue criminal charges against Lebsack or Clark. Based on the wishes of the alleged victim, Valley Brook Church, no further investigation will be conducted in this matter. This case may be closed. There was also a report submitted to the IRS. Nature of violation to the IRS referred organization is Valley Brook. This was submitted February 5th of 2016. The violations checked are directors, officers, persons are using income assets for personal gain. Organization is engaged in commercial for-profit business activities. Organization failed to report employment income or excise tax liability properly. Organization engaged in deceptive or improper fundraising practices.
Valley Brook leadership expressed that they do not wish to be audited at this time.
Name of persons involved: Doug Lebsack, Mary Clark. Date: entire tenure of Doug Lebsack as pastor of Valley Brook. Description of activities. Current leadership at Valley Brook ran a forensic audit after several pastors resigned. Results were found that imply illegal activity by Doug Lebsack and Mary Clark. We do not know if Valley Brook has contacted the IRS about tax compliance issues. And then the information for the submitter is there. with a checkbox. I'm concerned that I might face retaliation or retribution if my identity is disclosed. This was submitted and never followed up on.
You know, I guess I don't know who else you would list as the victim, because to say Valley Brook as a whole can mean a lot of things. I guess if you're like the leadership team or the overseers, you have the authority to say like Valley Brook does not want to do this.
Yeah.
And you can speak for a lot of people when you say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult for the people who gave the money in the same way that it was difficult when we were doing Lugenbild and you go through all those transactions and at the end of the day you have like $20,000 that like you have no. And of course in that situation it was decided there wasn't enough information. In this situation it was decided that the victim didn't want to pursue charges in the way that when things happen to people they can pass on pursuing it or not. So that's what they decided to do. It's a lot of money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's good fortune to resign and flee the state and not have anybody come knocking on your door after.
Yeah. It's just, you get to this point with the money stuff. And like in the last podcast, it became very clear that mismanagement of nonprofits happens a lot. And this is a nonprofit of a different magnitude for sure. But at the end of the day, it's like nonprofits get mismanaged a lot. There is not a lot of recourse or consequence at like a state level even to like make people accountable, to have like some sort of auditing done. If you want to take money and get away with it, doing it through a nonprofit is quite frankly, we reviewed how many stories in the last podcast of other people who had done stuff that a large portion of them, the charges were just dismissed.
Yeah.
And they all stole money. And, you know, you do think like if I were to steal money from my employer, I'd probably get fired for that.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, you can effectively, you know, steal a lot of money and like there really is no consequence for it.
I guess this isn't the most important part, but to do it while you're abusing the people you're taking the money from and to answer to your actions with indignance and denial, really taking money in maybe the scummiest way possible in a church where people think their money is going to charitable causes. And
and just like with Lugenbild, talking to people who now, as a result of having been scammed in one way or the another in that scenario, how like there was hesitation going forward to give to a charitable organization. I can see where if this had happened to you, it would be very difficult to want to like tithe for at another church.
Imagine what this could do to your faith in a religious organization. Yeah.
So those are the efforts that some concerned citizens, you know, tried their best to try and get something done, but alas, everybody is roaming free. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. Another episode coming up soon.
Okay.
All right.
Stay tuned.
Bye.
Chosen is presented by Cool and Unusual Punishment. Research and interviewing by Jody Haas, with editing and mixing by Tyler Haas. Our theme music for this series is by Zavely. You can find more music by him on Apple Music. Just search for Zavely, Xavly. This podcast is a proud member of the Nerd and Tie Network, a coalition of Wisconsin-produced shows that you can find at nerdandtie.com. You can also join the discussion in the forums at nerdandtie.social. You can reach us directly by sending us a message on our Facebook page or by emailing us at mail@coolandunusualpunishment.com. You can find links to all of these things and more in our show notes by visiting our website, coolandunusualpunishment.com. I'll have to cut this out, but you almost called him Dumb Lebsack.
Yes. I heard myself do it.